Well, yeah, I have to say that being one of the few female entrepreneurs in Barcelona, it's really a pleasure to introduce and to interview one of the few female women BC on BC World in Spain. Then thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
And yeah, Carina, you were CEO of ING Direct for 6 years, more than 6 years. And then you moved to entrepreneurial and investors scene as a general partner of K-Found. That is one of the Spanish VC firms investing on seed and Series A rounds. And also you are recently chairwoman of Adigital. That is one of the most, the main association of internet-based business. But something that I really like is that you are a woman, member of the board of several very well-known Spanish companies. That is, as Alex said, is also something atypical. And then seeing your profile and this complete profile you have, you that have been many years in corporate sector, how do you think this is helping you to succeed on BC World?
Well, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I have not succeeded yet, so I don't know. This is still to come, and I still need so many years to see whether we are going to be successful or not, though I'm sure we are doing the right things, or at least the things that we believe in. The transition from the corporate world to a more entrepreneurial world is really tough, I have to admit. It looks like very romantic, because wow, now I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to be surrounded of nice people, nice projects, and with lots of creativity and ideas. But then I realized that I don't know how to do anything. Because
sure.
No, it's true. After working with lots of resources, many people around, my role was mainly to tell the people what to do, but not to do the things. And that transition for me was extremely tough, in the sense I just saw myself in the front of a screen saying, okay, what's next? What shall I do right now? So in that respect, being surrounded by lots of resources and having a plan for every day, because your agenda is not run by you, it's somehow run by the corporation. And suddenly move to, okay, my agenda is my own, I need to see what I want to do next. And then I am almost alone. For sure, in K-Found, we have a fantastic team. But at the beginning, at the early days, it was like, okay, so what do I need to do? So this is like the bad part. The good part is that I think that from BC, I see the world from a different perspective.
Sure.
Because I don't see the world like a pure investor and just looking at the numbers,
sure.
but looking more at the people and looking more to the leadership of the team that is around startup. And then trying to, not to make the financial supervision of the projects just only this, but also trying to position myself a bit like a coach of the founders, because I think that most of the time is being very tough. Sure. Also to be the founder, and you feel very much alone.
Sure.
And then in K-Found, we are really obsessed about 4 things, and we think that all the startups should pay attention at those 4 things. The first is the obvious, which are the financials and the cash, and for sure you need to have a solid financials and a solid cash behind. But then we put a lot of attention in everything which is related to the culture of the company, values and principles, and starting since the very first days, because then initially you can think that, okay, why should I pay attention to the culture? We are just a team of 5 or 6,
sure.
But suddenly you
cannot have culture yet.
Exactly. But then you start running your company, it becomes successful, you need more people, you have not paid attention to that, and you start recruiting people that might not be the right one.
Exactly.
And therefore,
exactly.
that is one of the main problems that we found when startups are starting to grow. So for us, culture and values is, since the very first day, very relevant. And in fact, taking into consideration what you mentioned about the board of directors, I am in the board of 3 companies that have more like a family background, and in each of them, you can see the personality of the founder still alive.
Sure.
So it's very important, very important. Even when you become IBEX 35, the personality is there.
It's still there.
Yeah. So culture and all the values of the company. Then the second one for us is design. In fact, this afternoon we are running an event on design also, because we think that design is what can make you different. And it's not design just in the user design. It's design as a methodology of working, as a methodology of creating your processes and procedures, and as a way of thinking in your company.
Yeah.
So design is like the third big leg for the companies that we look for. And then the fourth one is data.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, we also find that in the startups, they are doing things with a lot of tech behind, but most of the time we forget about our own data, and capturing data for the customers is okay, and most of the startups do, but then is how do we use data for taking our own decisions and for managing our own company.
Okay.
And believe it or not, in most of the times, we find that there are not specific people assigned to the data use of the company.
Yeah,
so it's financials, it's values, principles, and culture, design, and then the data.
So this design issue makes you different from other BCs, right? It's not common.
We are learning. We are still on our path of learning, and that's why we are experimenting ourselves as well. But we think it's very relevant. In fact, when I look at the world, I think that it has never been as easy as it is today to create a company. It's really easy. Creating a company is relatively easy.
Yeah.
Making it scalable. And making it relevant for the consumers is tougher than ever, because we are surrounded by so many things that having the attention of your market is extremely difficult. So we think that through design, you can at least differentiate a bit yourself.
Sure, it's interesting. Then now let's talk a little bit about the landscape of investment in Spain, and how do international investors see Spain for investing opportunities? How do you see them? They are interested on coming here to invest in Spanish companies.
I think that for that a good example is to see how many investors came last week to the summit.
Yeah, you were there.
Yes.
You can explain us a little bit about your experience.
And then it's true that every year we are seeing more interest for international investors. And I think that that interest is based on mainly the quality of the people. And one of the things that they always mention is that Spain is a big enough country to test the concept, but it's not as big as to make it really a great big company or to scale since day one. So most of the Spanish entrepreneurs are always with the internationalization in their mind. So they are, since day one, planning to go abroad. And this is something that they like very much. This is one of the reasons they mention why they came to Spain. Then it's also true that Spain is a very good country to live, and that attracts talent from different, from other European countries. And we are seeing that the interest is also going up as we start to see some exits, and we start to see some Spanish companies going into rounds with an important amount of money.
Yeah, this was my following question. And we see that in Spain, lots of startups have access to seed capital and Series A's, and some Series B. But for a Series C or D, you definitely have to go abroad to look for investors. And why is this happening? Because we start having big Spanish companies needing this C and D round, but you have to go abroad.
Yeah, Yeah, when we talk about that question, I started to think.
Yeah.
And the initial reaction is, well, maybe there's not enough money for those rounds, and then you need international investors that have bigger funds. But then what I started to think is that maybe the issue comes from the fact that there are not many Spanish companies scaling to that size. Okay, therefore, Spanish investors are more focused on the initial rounds, and the few of those companies, critical mass for that, there are more, and therefore your probability to find one that is going to succeed is bigger. And as there are not as many rounds for bigger funds, that's the reason why in Spain most of the funds are concentrated on the initial.
So the money is lower than the creation of startups.
Exactly.
First we need startups having exits and success, and after the money came. So.
Exactly. Having said that, in the past few weeks we have seen 1, 2, 3 at least. Well, we have like 5, 6 Spanish companies with rounds with more than 20 million. So it's really important rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, but it would be nice that those investors will be also in here and the money just keep in Spain, no? Instead of going abroad. And the wealth of this created by these companies will remain in here.
Which is very important also because yesterday I was talking to one startup, which is one of the solid ones, okay? And we were talking about how they can change the perception or they can increase the reputation of the company, this sort of thinking. And in fact, having investors that can connect you to your local market is very relevant. And I think that this is one of the roles of the investors, trying to help you to connect with your market. And the fact is that if you are just having those international investors, it's true that abroad they will help you a lot, but you also need to have somebody in your home market to help you with these high-level connections as well.
Sure.
So the problem is that you should have both the international but also the local one hand by hand.
Sure. So, and then you're seeing lots of entrepreneurs and coming to GiveFound and talking to you. What's the biggest mistake you see in entrepreneurs when approaching a VC? What do you recommend to do and not to do when coming to a VC?
I would like to start my answer by the other way around, which is the VCs, we make a lot of mistakes.
Sure.
And
that's also true.
We make a lot. And then when we receive a company, we are human beings. So sometimes it depends on the amount of work you have that day. Okay, things like this, or today I feel very bad and I'm not paying enough attention to this model. So my disclaimer is, for sure we don't have the answers, for sure we fail a lot. Having said that, I think that to answer to your question, sometimes the perception that we have is that the entrepreneurs don't understand very well the VC rules.
Sure.
And don't understand very well that at the end we are not angels. We would love to be angels, but we need to give money back to our investors. And therefore the type of companies that we look for are those companies that we think we are going to be able to sell 10 times the price we paid initially. And those type of companies need to have specific metrics and need to have specific projections, and you need to be realistic in those projections, okay? So my recommendation would be really understand very well the VCs that you are going to see, what are the different strategies that they are following, what is the size of the fund. That is extremely relevant because sometimes smaller funds will request less of a big exit at the end of the day and will put less pressure. While the big funds, the bigger funds, and mainly the international ones, will put a lot of pressure to really multiply 10 times the investment they've done. And that, I think, is an interesting recommendation, something to have in mind when approaching a VC.
Maybe this is because there's a lack of education from VCs to entrepreneurs. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur and you need money, it's sure that you you just look at the kind of BC you're approaching, but a BC, maybe they have to educate more or communicate better what they are looking for. Because what it's true is that when you are facing a BC, they never say no. You know, when you don't like a project, you never say no. You say, yeah, maybe next time or in the future. Because I think, I guess that is to not disencourage entrepreneurs. But maybe there's a lack of communication on what BCs really want to see or they are really focused on. I don't know, it's something that, on my experience, I can say, no, that BCs, maybe they are not as clear as they have to be in benefit of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, this is something that we try to do, and it's true that if you are a second-time entrepreneur, you already know everything, or at least most of the things, but for the first-time entrepreneurs, it's true that it's a difficult path.
Exactly.
And sometimes, well, you need a class to understand the different possibilities, the different terms, the different conditions.
Sure.
And
Sure.
But especially, I think that you need to make your job before, and you need to really investigate the VCs that you're approaching to understand.
The right ones. Yeah. Okay, good. Now let's talk about you as a woman in this male predominant scene, and how is it in BC world? And any anecdote or any advantage maybe? Because you are few then.
To be honest, no. I think it's even tougher than working for financial institutions.
Yeah,
really.
Sure.
Yeah, because in banking there are many women around, and well, especially if you work for modern companies, you have lots of female mindset. I think that in the VC there's completely a male mindset, and for me it's. I mean, I'm very happy with my colleagues, and we really get along very well, and especially at KFUN, all of them are fantastic. But it's true that it's a world dominated by men.
But maybe you can...
And a prototype of men, because they are all almost the same.
But
I have two of them here.
But I think that you were talking about talent and values that you were looking at on startups, and I think that females maybe are better. We are better on having this, on perceiving these aptitudes than men. No, that maybe they are more analytics and they are more focused on financials and data of startups. Maybe your role could give value, to add value to the decision of which startups to have.
Definitely, and it's like the discussion of having women on executive roles or in boards.
Because of the diversity.
Yeah, and also because 50% of the population are women, and therefore for creating whatever the business, they will be decision makers. They will be decision makers of your business, and therefore you need to count on them. I'm such a believer in customer-centric companies, in companies that really start with a friction, okay? And then how you solve that friction and how you create everything around your customers.
Sure.
For that, you need to understand them, you need to observe them, you need to really love them, you need to want to do something different for them.
To listen them.
Yes, exactly. And 50% of the population are women, therefore...
you need women.
You need, because if not, you are losing like a part of your brain.
Sure. Then I guess that there's many entrepreneurs listening you now. And what advice can you give them, and according to your experience? And especially tips for female entrepreneurs, because as an entrepreneur, I heard lots of women giving excuses for not setting up a company or not starting a venture. And what tip can you give them to encourage them to be more and to add value to this ecosystem? Because we need you girls, really.
Yes, you know something, I think that this is a personal choice.
Yeah, sure.
Therefore, I cannot encourage women nor men, because I think that is something that you need to decide on your own, and if you see yourself doing this type of job. again, coming to my banking background, it's true that women, we are more risk averse. We don't like risk. There are many studies that said that when the credit in a branch, for example, a bank branch, is given by a woman, then this credit the quality is much better than those given by men. Yeah, there are many studies. In fact, with the crisis, we saw all the statistics, and when the branches had a woman as director of that branch, then the indebtedness of that branch was lower than many of these. So I think that we are less risk averse. Therefore, it's a matter of your choice. I think that my only advice would be not to be afraid.
Exactly, just do it.
Not to be afraid. This is the only thing that I can say.
Just do it. Okay, then
Just
nice tips, and I think it's very encouraging having you here and talking about your role as a VC and woman entrepreneurship. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. Gracias. Gracias.